This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and open up at 9:02.
The first applicant is not here. Has withdrawn.
Okay. So I move to adjourn. Well, not adjourn, actually, to just suspend for right now.
For recess until 10:15?
Yes.
All right.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our ad hoc panel for the police chief interviews. We have with us this morning Chief Gus Medina from Tequesta. We have Lieutenant Ryan Mugridge from Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. We have Lieutenant Michael O from Highland Beach, or pardon me, Major Lieutenant O from Highland Beach, and we have Administrator Kevin Lucas from the city of, or the town of Jupiter Inlet Colony. Our interview right now is John Donato. The way this is going to work, I will read the questions to the candidates, and the panel will be taking down notes and their impressions from the candidates. That way they can fully get their impressions and the candidate can focus on his answers. Are we ready? All right. Mr. Donato, if you would like to take a moment to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is John Donadio. Presently, I live in Point Beach in the Palm Isles community. I've been living there for 8 years now. My wife and I are renters. We moved to Florida after my retirement from the Oneonta City Police Department in New York. I was police chief there for 25 years. And it's been my lifelong dream to move to Florida, at least any warm climate. I'm an avid tennis player, now pickleball player. And we moved in 2007. We moved because I got a job offer from the city of Hawthorne, which is right next to Gainesville. They wanted to start a police department. They had no equipment, no personnel. They wanted to start it from scratch. And I thought it was a great opportunity for someone who'd been in law enforcement for as long as I have. I always thought about starting my own police department. When I say my own, I mean community's police department, but I've been at the firsthand selecting personnel and equipment. When I arrived there, I found that it was a very poor community compared to some of the other communities that I've been associated with in Florida, and that they had hardly any funds whatsoever. So I took an opportunity to reach out to other police departments, Broward County being the first one, to see if I can get any vehicle and equipment from them. They were kind enough to donate some police vehicles. Then I reached out to the Gainesville Police Department, and they donated the emergency lights for the cars. And I also reached out to Wildlife Commission, and they donated the radios. So we're able to start the police department based on the equipment that didn't cost the community anything. Then I began a search for police personnel. We put out ads in the paper, brought them in, screened them, and we hired 3 police officers right from the get-go. And working with the township administration, we were very, very successful the first year. We were self-supportive. And the township administrator was so impressed by how successful we are that he decided he wanted to start a fire department also. They were basically run by the county also. So they reached out and they got a retired fire chief who started their own department. However, right out of the bat, right out of the beginning, they wanted $280,000 for a fire pumper. And like I said, it was a very poor community. And after a year of this, I saw the handwriting on the wall. I know it wasn't going to last very long because the community did not have the funds. They formed a committee. My wife happened to be on that committee also, a committee of 5 of the community. And they decided that they wanted to disband the police and fire department because of the funds. So it's a sad day for me, but I moved on. And that's where it all began, my first association with the state of Florida. I don't know how further you want me to go with this, but I can talk all day on experiences here.
Nope, that's good. All right. What role do you feel the culture of an organization plays? How would you assess the culture of our department? And how would you recognize and what would you do if the culture becomes toxic?
Well, communication is probably one of the best fixes. I'm not familiar with the town of Ocean Ridge. I have no idea of anything other than I listen to a few town meetings, so I don't know. But I think one of the first things you would start with is communication, open it up to the people of the community and look at it from their point of view. Listen, learn, and see what solutions you can come up with, not on your own, but based on meetings with law enforcement, people in the community, and the elected officials. And try to pinpoint what the problem is and work out on the solution community-wise.
Which is more important, retaining employees or hiring to fill vacancies? What changes or ideas do you have for retaining employees and for filling vacancies?
I think it'd be best to try to keep your employees rather than just across the board hire new people. What was the second part of that question?
What changes or ideas do you have for retaining employees or for filling vacancies?
Interviewing them, find out what their needs are, what the needs of the community, and meld them in.
How do you suggest you keep an employee? So someone walks through that door, they decide they want to be an Ocean Ridge police officer. How would you, the head of that agency, keep that employee?
I'll find out why they want to leave in the first place and see what we can do to rectify the problems they see in the community. They might have an issue that you're not aware of. Make yourself aware of what's bothering them and seeing what you can do to work out a solution. Might be a very easy fix.
Describe your leadership style.
So follow-up question.
Oh, you have a follow-up question? Okay.
You have some experience with working with some smaller agencies. I'm sure you've experienced some of these issues with retaining employees and attracting new candidates into the agency. Have you done anything at these agencies that would be considered unconventional or outside the box to try and address those two issues?
Yeah, when I was with the Oneonta City Police Department, we were dropping a lot of officers because of the low wage that they were paying the officers. Myself and the city manager, we looked into the situation, and I had an idea of seeing if we could have a physical fitness program paid for by the city, which in the long run would pay for itself. Because what was happening is that we were losing a lot of officers to injuries on the job. They'd make an arrest, there'd be a tussle, they get injured, they get hit by cars, there were a lot of things going on. And they were out for a very, very long time before they came back to work. And mainly because, in my opinion, they were out of shape. And ordinarily, if they were in good shape, they'd be back to work maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, whereas they'd be out for months at a time. We were losing officers that way. So I convinced the rest of the elected officials to let the manager and I go out and see what programs we can get started for the Oneonta City Police Department. And we went to other communities and we took a few courses, and we came up with a plan, and this was the first in the state of New York, to make it a mandatory requirement that all police officers pass a physical fitness test each and every year to keep their positions. And there are a lot of side issues built in on that. For example, if an officer got injured, we give them enough time to heal before they'd have to participate in the program, the physical fitness program, to make sure they were fit to come back to work. And that took off from there. What happened is the elected officials decided to pay for memberships for the officers and their spouses to attend physical fitness facilities. They had one that was just brand new built in the city of Oneonta. So it was thousands and thousands of dollars a year costing the city. However, the insurance companies realized the benefit in that, and they start lowering the rates. So the city actually ended up saving money in keeping with the program.
Describe your leadership style.
Relaxed. I open door policy. I make my office open to the officers and people of the community at any time. They call. I don't necessarily need an appointment. If I'm not busy, I'm going to walk in. We have an honest face-to-face discussion as to what's troubling them, and I take it from there. So it's very informal.
As a follow-up to that, what is the key to developing a good team?
I guess the main key is training, to make sure the officers are capable of melding together by sending them to training, make sure they know what they're doing.
How would you support, how would you support the mental health of your department? What types of ideas do you have to ensure that not only the financial and physical well-being of staff are being met, but also the mental health?
I'm not sure I understand that question. How do I help the situation, or?
How would you support the mental health to make sure that the officers are being supported from their mental health? Obviously, law enforcement is a field in which they see a lot of trauma, tragedy, different things like that impacts their mental health, not only on the job, but they take it home with them every day. How do you support the officers and the department with those mental health challenges? And what types of ideas do you have to ensure not only their financial and physical well-being, but their mental health well-being?
I have no answer for that, other than I have to experience it and come up with a solution.
You will be the chief on a barrier island community. There's a hurricane expected to hit the community. What do? What do you do when people refuse to evacuate? How do you prepare and take action, take care of your staff?
I would assume there's some kind of a written plan that you have, which gives us our authority to use, I would say the very least is knocking on doors and requiring them to leave. I don't know if there's a law that says you can actually physically take them out of their property. So I don't know what the law would be.
Describe your ideal process for establishing the budget for your department and ongoing monitoring and reporting.
The way we used to do it in Oneonta is we'd have a meeting with all our staff officers and line officers, as well as rank and file, to find out what their needs are, what needs they're taking care of for the year, what they feel is most important to them and put it in the budget. Or actually request have funds put in the budget.
Describe your, or pardon me, sorry, we finished that one. Ocean Ridge is a small department within a small overall organization. As the police chief, you will wear many hats and interact with the employees. Familiarity with operations, administration, investigations, training, policy, communications, evidence, etc. is necessary. At times, the chief will need to assist in all areas as a working chief. What area do you see as your greatest strength? What area have you had the least experience in your law enforcement career?
Probably my greatest strength is the ability to deal with people, talking, calming situations. My least training is, say, forensics, or fingerprinting, et cetera, reading fingerprints, things like that. I have not much experience at all.
Share an experience in which you successfully coordinated with others.
When I was chief in Oneonta, we had a drug situation where we were getting Crips, former Crips members coming into the city of Oneonta, and they were selling drugs. They were beginning to take over a large portion of our downtown area. So I arranged a meeting with the New York State troopers and to have a joint effort between us and them in patrolling the streets. And what we did, we came up with an idea where we would actually go to the places where they were dealing drugs and trying to get customers, and not taking any physical action, but just standing beside them, making it uncomfortable for them to deal, such as in bars, on street corners. We would have a Oneonta City police officer alongside a state trooper walking a beat. And where we knew the problem areas where they would just walk up to that particular area. And it dissuaded a lot of the business from being conducted there. And over a period of 1 year, it was non-existent. They left for another community.
As a follow-up, how about a similar coordination effort that was not as successful?
Say again, what?
A follow-up question, and similar coordination effort that was not as successful.
Yeah, never had any experience with when it wasn't successful.
How do you handle disagreements within the department and between team members?
What I used to do is call them in my office individually and try to gain a perspective as to what the problem was from their eyes, and then have another meeting where I'd have them both together and discuss it in my presence and work it out like that.
How important is work-life balance?
Is work,
Work-life balance.
I don't understand the question. Life
Work-life balance.
balance?
The balance between your work life and your life, your personal life.
I think it's important. I think one enhances the other, and if you have a difficult life somewhere else, it can be difficult on the job too. So I think it's important that they know.
Do you have any questions for the town of Ocean Ridge?
we come here, my wife and I, we use the beach, that's about it. We don't, we're not familiar with any of the problems that they have here.
You don't have any questions for us about the department or anything like that? Okay. Gentlemen, any follow-up questions? Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I will be making the decision and making a public announcement on June 20th, after the planning and zoning meeting, no earlier than 10:30 a.m.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
At this time, we will take another recess until our next interview, which is scheduled at 11:30 with Eric Harold.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our Chief of Police interviews. This is our 11:30 interview with Mr. Eric Harold. Again, we have with us Chief Gus Medina from Tequesta, Lieutenant Ryan Mugridge from Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, Major Michael O from Highland Beach, and Administrator Kevin Lucas from Jupiter Inlet Colony. The format is I will ask all of the questions so that our advisory panel have time to write down their impressions of your answers. So we will start out first. If you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, obviously, my name is Eric Harold. You've got that part. I grew up here in South Florida. My father was an airline pilot, and once he retired, he moved the family to North Carolina. I was only 15. I did my first year at Christopher Columbus Catholic School. North Carolina, new family friends in North Carolina. Went to Appalachian State. That's where I graduated from. Did an internship with the police department there, and that turned into 6 years with the Boone Police Department. I was also in ROTC at Appalachian State, which led to a commission in the United States Army. So I had a dual career for the next 30 years. In 1994, I changed from the Boone Police Department. I moved to the Charlotte area to pursue a master's degree. I started work with the Mooresville Police Department, worked another 8 years with Mooresville. After the events of 9/11, I threw my hat in the ring to go federal. Became a federal air marshal, was promoted to supervisory level in 2009. And that transferred me because of the job back here to South Florida. I live in Coral Springs, and that's where I've lived and that's where I've worked. And currently work, am eligible to retire, and because of my age, the agency, the government will require me to retire at the end of this year. So I don't feel like I'm old enough to just do anything. I enjoy working, and have started submitting resumes and looking for this. I always thought that it would be nice to finish out a career as a police chief, since that's where I started. I retired from the military in 2016.
Great, thank you. What role do you feel the culture of an organization plays? How would you assess the culture of our department? And how would you recognize and what would you do if the culture becomes toxic?
It would be hard for me to judge the culture of the department here, other than newspaper articles, and that's only going to tell me one side of the story. I can talk to individuals, and again, that would tell me their side of the story. But I think to really learn culture, you have to live it. Along those lines, to foster a positive culture, I'm a big follower of a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek, who talks about fairness, consistency, leadership principles, and when it comes to being fair, consistency is the key. You can't treat people different, and at the same time, everybody will look to how you treat one person, because that's how you're gonna treat everybody else. And that's my definition of fairness, because treating everybody the same is not what I would consider fair, but sometimes what I get as an answer when I ask the question. Treating everybody the same isn't accurate, because not everybody is the same. So given the same set of circumstances, you treat people the same with the same amount of consistency. And people, like I said, they're gonna witness what you do. And if you make the right decision, and I have a collaborative leadership style, I believe that will sponsor a positive culture. When people are not in fear of their position or anything else.
Which is more important, retaining employees or hiring to fill vacancies? What changes or ideas do you have for retaining employees or for filling vacancies?
In preparation for this interview, I spoke with different heads of agencies, different town managers, different people, and individuals at the Palm Beach State College. And I understand that retention right now is one of the bigger problems faced by most chiefs and most agencies in the area. So that being said, hiring is extremely important. But like anything else, there's a happy balance to that. And one of the biggest issues, or one of the things that makes retention so important is keeping good people. But there has to be that balance of understanding who is worth keeping. If you keep somebody too long, they're just harder to get rid of later. And as much money, effort as it takes to get into the hiring, you can have that much more of a problem if somebody's 4 years in, 5 years in, 6 years in, or longer, and they're not the right person. So although hiring is extremely important, it's much worse. And I've had that experience where somebody 4 years into the job wants to transfer to what he thought was a cush job. Let's say he wanted to go to a school resource officer, because he told me he was afraid, this one individual who worked for me for a couple of years. And we knew it was an issue with him, that he was afraid. So he approached me and asked if I would support him to a school resource officer position. But my response may not have been what he wanted. I explained to him that to be a school resource officer, you have to be an officer first. And I didn't think it would benefit the agency if he stayed on. And that was shortly before I resigned to take the air marshal job. So the outcome of that situation was the chief did transfer him to school resource officer. He ended up getting fired 2 years later. So 7 years into his career, he had to start over somewhere else.
Describe your leadership style.
My style comes from both law enforcement and military. From the military point of view, you always think about a combat situation or a situation where you have to make an instant decision and you go with it. And sometimes that happens in police work. You're at a crime scene, there's an incident, and you have to take care of it. You have to take care of it immediately, and I have done that several times in the past. But when there is time to make a decision, I see no reason not to be able to include as many people, get as much advice to make that decision, have as much input as possible. I'm a firm believer when it comes to most things that there's an 80% solution, meaning that 10% to 20% of the people are not going to be happy no matter what you do. You can have 10% on one extreme, 10% on the other extreme, but if you learn to compromise, you can probably make 80% of the people happy by doing the right thing. And that is usually my goal in everything that I do, is not making people happy, but doing the right thing and learning how to compromise. And that's the skill, is being able to take different things from different people and be able to put the best foot forward. You get the best product, I believe that way.
What is the key to developing a good team?
A wise sergeant major once told me, it was the first time I've heard of it, it becomes more common now, but people don't care about you until they know you care about them. And it's just like a team. I show people that I care about them. When I ask somebody how are they doing, it's not just to pass them in the hallway, it's because I want to know how they're doing. And when you're consistent with that, and you let people know that you care about them, they tend to want to care about you, and they want to be loyal to you. And things develop from there. in a positive light. I think that's the key. There's a difference between somebody who likes their job and loves their job, and somebody who likes their job. They tell you they like their job, they're satisfied. They might be happy with the pay, they might be happy with their coworkers. But somebody who loves their job, they don't want to go work anywhere else. It's not the money, it's the friendship, it's the family. And building a good team is trying to get everybody to the point that they love their job. At least that's the goal.
How would you support the mental health of your department? What types of ideas do you have to ensure that not only the financial and physical well-being of the staff are being met, but also the mental health?
A little while ago, or this last question, I talked a little bit about family. You have to learn to take care of each other in law enforcement. There's a brotherhood. We talk about our brothers and sisters. If you go to a person's funeral, a civilian who's passed away, and they're very popular, sometimes I've seen a few hundred people at that funeral. And I'm guessing everybody here has been to a law enforcement officer's funeral where there's several thousand people. We care about each other. And again, we demonstrate that in our consistency. And then we demonstrate that in how we react to problems. We don't need to overreact, but we definitely need to react. We need to show people that we care, and we need to have plans in place on how to respond, whether it's with, I know that Palm Beach County has a 211 mental assistance program. I know that there's a hospital close by here, JFK, that could be a resource. So like anything else, we would have those resources built in, explored, and utilized when necessary. There are also things that we can do internally in the police department. With the Air Marshal Service, we have a system where we have a initial group of individuals named inside the office, and they get specialized training, and it's more of a peer-to-peer evaluation, peer-to-peer counseling. And those individuals who are trained, if they need to escalate something, they know where to escalate it to. But again, it goes to show people how much the organization cares.
You will be the chief on a barrier island community. There's a hurricane expected to hit the community. What do you do? What do you do when people refuse to evacuate? How do you prepare and take care of your staff?
Much like the previous question about preparing, having resources available, and not having that deer in the headlight look when something occurs. For a hurricane, you said it, you're on a barrier island. That preparedness happens all year round. You want to identify hazards, you want to identify vulnerabilities, you want to have a list of who the elderly is, you want to have a list of property that may be abandoned, property that nobody's home. You already should have in place working with Emergency Operations Center in the area, multi-agency training, multi-agency tabletop exercises where all these things are practiced beforehand. And then you have to classify two separate and distinct events. One is the hurricane and the disaster itself and how people are going to prepare for it. Second is the aftermath. The aftermath is much longer. I've lived here for 10 years, but I've been through a hurricane before. I came down I was with the Boone Police Department in 1992, and I worked 2 weeks on the Alpha Bravo shift. I worked the Bravo shift with the Homestead Police Department after Hurricane Andrew. The aftermath can be incredible, and most of you look like you probably remember Hurricane Andrew was incredible. There was a lot of damage there. And because of multi-agency assistance, because of FEMA, because National Guard, because soldiers from Fort Bragg, the amount of effort that was put in, it made things much easier. Nobody had to work alone. And again, that was because all these things were put into place beforehand. When it comes to taking care of your own officers and your own agencies, when you're working that Alpha Bravo shift, the person I was with, well, I was working Bravo shift, so the person I was with during daylight hours, he was with his family trying to take care of his house. And then he'd come to work at 6 p.m. And then we worked a 12-hour shift. I was a little different. I came down to help my sister, and that's what, she lived in Homestead, and that's what led me into 3 or 4 days after the hurricane working with Homestead PD. But if the officer had not been taken care of by his agency, by the heads of his agency, if they didn't have planning in place for the family, what they were going to do, he wouldn't have been able to function. So you have to take care of your people so they're able to take care of the residents and do their job, because they have double responsibility. It's extremely important to take care of both.
Describe your ideal process for establishing the budget for your department and ongoing monitoring and reporting.
I guess I have to point out that that's probably going to be my weakest area. Although I assisted with the budget at Morrisville PD, kind of worked as I didn't have the title, but because of the way it was set up, I worked as maybe an assistant chief a little bit with some budget influence. But again, doing preparation for this interview, I spoke to another town manager. I spoke to another assistant chief, and how budgeting is done and issued. And they all said the same thing, which fell in line with everything that I've, all of my personality so far and my characteristics is collaboration and not putting in preparation, collaboration and preparation, speaking with the finance director, speaking with the town manager, speaking with the workforce to find out what the needs are, and then monitoring the budget, making sure that you're not over budget, that you're getting what you need, preparing for the next year's budget, and trying to get as many people involved as possible.
Ocean Ridge is a small department within a small overall organization. As the police chief, you will wear many hats and interact with the employees. Familiarity with operations, administration, investigations, training, policy, communications, evidence, etc. is necessary. At times, the chief will need to assist in all areas as a working chief. What area do you see as your greatest strength? And what area have you had the least experience in your law enforcement career?
Coming from 2 smaller agencies before I went federal, familiar with having to wear different hats. I said I started with my internship in college, and the first thing that I did after that was work into a part-time dispatching job, and that's how I finished my last semester of college. That led into the full-time position and going through the academy. Started out after I was certified, marking tires, getting parking tickets, to a road officer. When I worked with Morrisville Police Department, I was a community police officer and wore many hats in that position. On a grant from the Clinton administration, and at that time, community policing was being pushed heavily. So I went to a lot of schooling and learned that community policing was learning what the residents wanted, not what the police wanted to get done and how to solve problems. Then I've worked as a detective. I've investigated homicides. I've always had that background. It started out with communication that served me well. I've been an instructor. I'm currently a firearms instructor with the federal government. Been an investigator, case agent with the Joint Terrorism Task Force with the FBI. I'm sitting here thinking what would be my weakest. And although I've done a lot of training with active shooters, I've never been on a SWAT team per se, a SWAT team or individual team along those lines. The weakest area would be things where I was exposed to, but not maybe led the organization in maybe a tactical manner, something along those lines. And like I said before, budget.
Share an experience in which you successfully coordinated with others.
Most recently, it would be working as a position called Assistant Federal Security Director for Law Enforcement. That's the law enforcement coordinator for TSA at the airport. That individual wears multiple hats and has to coordinate with a lot of different people. I've worked that position for the last few months at the Fort Lauderdale Airport. The inner workings of the airport is you have the Broward County Airport Division, which actually owns the airport. You have TSA, that is the federal government that regulates the security, and you have the Broward Sheriff's Office who provides that security, but they actually work for the Broward County Airport Division. And they have their own ideas sometimes on what the security should be done, what should be done with security and how it should be done at the airport, because the airport's run more as a business. And they want to make sure that the passengers are taken care of properly, and the airlines, the stakeholders are involved. And here, as the coordinator for all law enforcement matters at the airport, it's my job to make sure that something as simple as a movement, when you have the Prime Minister of Canada coming through the airport, that he's able to get through security properly and is able to coordinate with the airline that he's traveling with. And at the same time, the TSA people at the checkpoints recognize what needs to be done, BSO themselves. And then I said, BCAT is ultimately responsible for the implementation of all those security plans. So there's just a lot of moving parts at an airport. That would probably be the most recent. But I could also turn to my experience in Kuwait with the military, where I was the chief of counterintelligence and intelligence support to all military forces inside the country. So it was coordinating and working with the embassy, coordinating and working with the military police, with all services, Navy, Air Force, Marines, even Coast Guard, and then host nation. I dealt a lot with the Kuwait Ministry of Defense, and Kuwait Ministry of the Interior, which was basically the police chief of the country, trying to make sure that the 100,000 soldiers, sailors, U.S. service members that were in country were safe, plus the hundreds of thousands of people that were transporting through on their highways and through their airports.
Can you share an experience about a coordination effort that was not as successful?
When I first came to the Miami Field Office for the Air Marshal Service, we had an issue that we're starting new types of employee evaluations. And I chose to put forward an idea of peer evaluations. And I learned an important lesson, that before you put forward a new idea, people need to know you. And I did it too fast. I had only been here for a few weeks or a month when I put out the idea that I wanted to do it. And very quickly, the feedback that I got from all the employees that worked for for me were that they didn't want to do it. They were just going to mark everybody top block because they thought that they didn't know what I was going to do with the information. And I realized that then the evaluation would have been worthless. This was an idea where they could learn from each other and I could learn from them. And I would not have achieved my goal if I had moved forward. And that was what I learned from it, is you have to be trusted before you implement things like that. So I sat back, I waited 8 months. People learned me a little bit. I learned them a little bit better. And then I went ahead and implemented it a little differently than I had originally planned, taking some of those things into consideration. And at the time, afterwards, it was considered a success by headquarters and other people. And it was, put out maybe as a model by some of the other squads to use. But at the time that I went forward, I'll never forget that was not a good idea to move that fast. It taught me I have to get trust from people.
How do you handle disagreements within the department and team members?
It took a hesitation, and I was thinking, I don't have to hesitate for that, it's communication. Most problems come from a lack of understanding or a lack of seeing both sides. I hate to go to this extreme, but it's the same way in our everyday life. It's the same way every time you go to a call, a domestic, an argument. You're getting half the story. They're not talking to each other. And usually when you get to the bottom of it, you find everybody says, oh, I didn't know that. And that's normally the case. There's extremes. I'm not being fantasizing here that every issue can be solved, but by most large part, it's a lack of understanding of the other point of view.
How important is work-life balance?
I go back to what I said before about people don't care about you until you care about them. And I love police work. I love the military, but I didn't do either for free. We have a family, and I would put the vast majority of people that work to support themselves and their family. And on the scale of importance, I'd say that most people put their spouse and their kids above their work. And for work to come back and say, no, we're number one, it's just not going to work. So I think work has to understand that about its employees. It shows the employees that you care about them. That doesn't mean you can't demand that it's a balance. I'm a firm believer that most issues, like I said, although there's an 80% solution, this is one where 51-49. It's not a 99% everything and then 1% the other. There's got to be a lot of give and take there. If a person's personal life doesn't allow them to work, then it's time for that person to move on. At the same time, if work can adjust a little bit, it doesn't affect a lot, and it doesn't cause a problem, and it makes his family life better, that's just going to show everybody else on the department that the agency cares. It's extremely important.
Do you have any questions for us?
Is there anything else you'd like to know from me, or any questions that I haven't answered to your satisfaction?
I was just curious what you know about the town of Ocean Ridge and any of the issues, crime issues, or anything like that that you may be coming into here.
Everything would just be from research. The one paper that seems to capture the most is probably the Coastal Star. And like I said at the beginning, that captures a point of view from there. But speaking with the assistant chief from one of the neighboring cities, he told me that he explained, which I'm familiar with, is that most departments, and from what I understand, the departments here in Palm Beach County do, are two meetings. You have the Association of Chiefs of Police, which I guess sir, you're president of, and meet frequently, as well as another meeting that the agencies meet together, talk about crime. And the current issue for all the communities is non-residents coming into Ocean Ridge, coming into the communities up here, committing thefts, larcenies, B&Es, and then fleeing. My understanding is that license plate readers is an extremely not only workable, but showing progress. And that's the same. In January, I went to my old police department in Mooresville, and they have put license plate readers up everywhere, and they have solved so many crimes, because again, that's a suburb city of Charlotte, same issue, people coming into Charlotte or coming from Charlotte and then going back to Charlotte. And whether it's burglaries, car B&Es, shoplifting, whatever the crime is, those license plate readers are really helping them solve a lot of crimes, even a murder or two in that case. So when I heard this from down here, he was explaining that it was the same sort of an issue. And again, the collaborative effort of everybody to discuss those kinds of issues. And then, of course, the basic history of the town. There's a big sign out front, established 1931.
Mine too.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. We will be meeting this evening at 6:30 for the advisory panel to give me their input, and then I will be making the public announcement on my decision on June 20th at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, immediately following the Planning and Commission meeting, but no earlier than 10:30 in the morning.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for all your time.
Great. We will now take a break until our afternoon interviews begin at 1:30. So we will take a lunch break. Hope to see the other members of the public here again this afternoon for the afternoon interviews. And members of the public that have joined us online, I hope you join us again this afternoon.
This
Good
conference will
afternoon,
now
ladies
be
and gentlemen,
recorded.
and welcome back to this afternoon's interviews for the police chief. We have with us again this afternoon, Chief Gus Medina from DeQuesta, Lieutenant Ryan Mugridge from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office.
How are you?
We have Major Michael O from Highland Beach, and Administrator Kevin Lucas from Clear Lake Colony. This afternoon, we are interviewing Albert Avino.
Iovino. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So I will be reading all of the questions,
Okay.
and the gentleman will be taking down their impressions of the comments. And so we will start out. You want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am not a native Floridian, so I will put that out there for everybody right now. Although I lived more in Florida than I have up north. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I always wanted to be in law enforcement. Started out very young in my career in public safety as a volunteer in New Jersey, with the volunteer fire department in the late 80s. And in 94, I believe it was, I moved into Broward County and went to the police academy in 96. I've worked for a bunch of different agencies, one in Broward, one in Dade, and then my father, who I was taking care of, the hustle and bustle of Broward in around early 2000s got to be a little too much, and we worked our way up to Indian River County, which is Vero Beach area, and that's where I've been for the bulk of my career, well, the other half of my career. Currently, I am a lieutenant with the Indian River Shores Department of Public Safety. We're kind of unique in that we're one of only 4 in the state that actually do offer all 3 services. So we fire, paramedic, and police.
All right. What role do you feel the culture of an organization plays? How would you assess the culture of our department? How would you recognize and what would you do if the culture becomes toxic?
Just because that's a three-part question, would you mind just repeating it one more time?
Sure. Do the first part. What role do you feel the culture of an organization plays?
Well, that's an interesting question because I have spent the majority of my career as a police officer, operations administration wise, and then in 2014, I went over to River Shores and wound up with a mixture of fire and EMS culture and police culture, which is a much different atmosphere rather than just a law enforcement agency. I think the culture within the department has everything to do with ultimately how the employees or the people that work for that town deal with the townspeople and how they treat them. I found that working for a department that involves paramedics and firefighters, the individuals that work there, they tend to be more compassionate, more understanding. They take a little more time with the people. They tend to focus on the medical side of it versus the law enforcement side of it for obvious reasons. That culture plays a lot with how you treat the townspeople. And what was the second part of the question now?
How would you assess the culture of our department?
So I think when you become a chief executive or a leader of any department, I think that there has to be an assessment period where you sit back and you kind of watch how things play out, unless it's something emergent for obvious reasons that you have to interact. As with any taking over leadership of any role, I would assess the department and start off with like a 30 or 60, 90-day plan. And within the first 30 days, I would sit back, watch the individuals, how they interact with the town, listen, probably do more listening than anything, interview the individual employees, ask them what their take is on the town and how they feel about things. And then at the 60-day mark, maybe start making changes and what have you. But I feel like coming in and changing things right away doesn't really provide a fair assessment of how things are in the town, because the town of Ocean Ridge may be, and I don't know, but from what I can glean, it may be a turnkey operation, and the townspeople are very happy with how things are done here, and they like the way the law enforcement is ran, they like the fire and EMS from Boynton Beach, whatever the case may be. So I would give some time to be able to assess it. And then what was the third part?
How would you recognize and what would you do if the culture becomes toxic?
So again, I think you get that twofold. I think you get it from the townspeople because you start hearing things through interacting and networking with people that are in the town or work within the town. And you also catch that from the employees, or you may even catch it toxicity right up front where you're getting complaints that maybe you weren't, or the type of complaints that you're getting. Unfortunately, I've had the opportunity to work for agencies that have toxic individuals in them. And I think that once that's identified that there's a problem with something, that it needs to be addressed, with obviously giving the individual or individuals an opportunity to explain themselves, or just going to them in person and saying, hey, I noticed that you're, like for instance, we have part of our shift work, our operations wise, we have 24-hour shifts. So 16 hours of that shift, our people act as a firefighter or medic, and then 8 hours of that shift, they act as a police officer. So there's a lot of sitting around time and idle time, and you can walk by places and hear things like, oh, this is this and this is that. And I think that it's up to the leadership, the first line supervisor leadership, and also the command staff to kind of nip that in the bud and say, well, what's the problem? What's the realization that you're not going to be able to please everybody all the time, but there may come a time, and I have worked for agencies, including the one that I work for now, where there are times where things are just, they need to be addressed, where people are complaining about work or mandatory hours, or whatever the case is, and they tend to just draw everybody into it. And personally, I think that creates a really negative environment, and it's very easy to get caught up into that, which is why it's important to address it right away and deal with it. Excuse me.
Which is more important, retaining employees or hiring to fill vacancies?
Again, so I just got back in May of last year from the Southern Police Institute, the officers' DOC course, and that was actually a very hot button topic that we discussed in detail, is hiring people and retaining them. And I grew up during the 80s. I started law enforcement in the 90s. You know, I am all about, as an employee, going to work for a place and giving them my 110% and working overtime and putting probably too much effort into the job. And I realized that we are at a crossroad with hiring and retaining people where that is not the mindset anymore. It's much different. And I think that putting a body into a spot doesn't necessarily fix what you're trying to do, fulfill what you're trying to do, because you can put anybody into a spot. But then we start investing time and money and energy and training and education into them, and then they leave. And the idea is that, like you see with schools of thought, like procedural justice, where they talk about the way you treat your employees is directly related to how your employees are going to treat the people and the townspeople they deal with. So the idea is that we give the people what they need. We bring on the best employees that we can and understand, hey, we want you to be here for the long haul. We want to give you the tools that you need to succeed. We want to train you. And we want you to go out there and treat people as if you wanted to be treated. So I would be more pro taking the time and hiring the right people for the job that truly want to be there and not looking for necessarily just filling a slot. And I haven't seen that with this department, because we hire triple certified people, which is very difficult to do. And can I go off?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. We actually use per diem police officers to help supplement some of the holes that we have with shift work, because it's just very difficult to find, train, and get triple certified people, especially experienced people. And I wouldn't blame any town for wanting the most qualified, experienced people to be there, especially in relation to fire and EMS calls. So we supplement with per diem police officers, and we look for experienced men and women that have maybe experienced things that they maybe never will experience at the shores, while making sure, hey, I want to be here. Like, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, and I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. And I feel that that's probably the most important thing when hiring an individual, is to make sure that this is where they want to be, and we're not a stepping stone for them because they want to be they ultimately wanted to be someplace else. And for the major, chief, and lieutenant, if you guys are involved in any of the hiring or not, I'm sure you see it now. It's just, we have the sheriff's office locally, they come in and they hire them at $49,000 a year, and then in a year or so, they're gone to Martin County Sheriff's Office for $64,000. And I don't blame an individual for doing that, but at some point there has to be something in place to prevent that and retain people who want to be here and understand the small town, family oriented, like, people like to work here, they want to be here mentality. And fortunately at the shores, with the firefighter side of it built into it, there's a lot of that where they know others in the firefighter community, guys go there, and they don't want to go anywhere. And I have firefighters and police officers that come from over an hour away from Palm Bay and St. Lucie County to work for us, because they get in there, they feel like it's family, they're treated well, we give them what they need, and we successfully retain them.
So the second part of this you kind of already addressed. What changes or ideas do you have for retaining employees and for filling vacancies?
Yes. So again, it goes back to the Shores, we deal with a very flat organization, and it goes back to individual attention. I don't know if you gentlemen are familiar with the strategic model policing that Port St. Lucie Police Department uses, but they have a program that we copied and implemented for like an employee forgiveness. So if an employee does something wrong, or they're not cutting it as far as training goes, they're given, they're pulled aside and they're given an additional plan, like, all right, you have 30 days to accomplish this goal, then we'll reevaluate it, and we invest, the Port St. Lucie does, as well as we do now, we invest as much time and energy into the employee, because, again, for us, we spend a lot of money to get someone over there. I mean, 5 months of the police academy, 4 or 5 months of daily observation reports, 3 months of a fire academy, 3 months of an EMT. Then we like to try to get them to get their paramedic, and then they're put through field training for the EMS and the fire and the paramedic as well. So you're talking maybe a year and a half before they're actually fully up and running as solo anything for that matter. And I'll give you a perfect example if I'm allowed to tell the war story or not, but you know, a gentleman that came over, young guy, good guy, just got out of the military, and we put him on FTO for police, and he's got his EMT and his fire. And then we tell the people we hire, you know, within the next 2 years, we'd like you to go and get your paramedic certification, which is, you know, it's a national certification. It's not an easy exam or easy to do between clinicals and ride times and everything else. And he, I guess, misconstrued what he was told, and he went and enrolled in the paramedic program. So he was trying to go to paramedic school plus field training for the police side of it, and he wound up having difficulty with the police side of it. So I met with the command staff, and I met with him, and I said, look, that's not how we plan it. I'm not sure how or what happened. There was a miscommunication, but what we're going to do is we're going to suspend your FTO program, finish your paramedic program, and then when you're done with that, we'll restart the FTO program. And I think that's kind of, that kind of investment is what you need to take in employees in order to show them that, yeah, we want you here. We're going to give you everything that we can to succeed, and we're going to retain them.
Describe your leadership style.
I mean, I could sit here and, I guess, spit off buzzwords like I'm democratic, but I'm autocratic when I need to be. I mean, I treat people like I want to be treated, keeping in the back of my mind that I know that ultimately my obligation is to the town. And are we doing the best that we can for those folks that we're dealing with? But at the same time, I believe that employees should be treated fairly. They should feel like they're being treated fairly. They should have the equipment that they need. An open door policy where if they have to come in and complain about something because they just need to talk about it, that they can do that. Or that we take the time, and I do as a leader, take the time to listen or recognize when there's issues with employees that maybe go beyond just talking about something. I'm an operational guy. I'm an administrative guy. I've fortunately had the opportunity to be in a lot of different aspects of this job, and I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty, and then I'm not afraid to obviously dress up in a suit and sit in front of a live television studio speaking as a council member, because I spent 2 years as a council member with the city of Sebastian. So, you know, I know that there are administrators, and this is nothing against them. They get to that position, and that's kind of where they stay. I'm not that person. I'm more of a hands-on kind of guy. When I need to be an administrator, I am. When I need to be professional and speak appropriately, I do, but I can also put on shorts and a t-shirt, and we have a gym upstairs, go work out at the gym and work out along next one of the guys that's up there working out. And I think that shows the guys that I'm approachable, as well as when it's time to conduct business, they know that I conduct business. And I'll give you a perfect example. Yesterday, I think actually this morning as well, I didn't go because I'm here, but we had facilities training, which requires us to go to a firefighter burn building facility, and we use the counties. By the way, I'm big on collaboration. There's so many things that we can't do at the shores that we get done, and the only reason why we get it done is because we collaborate with the sheriff's office, their garage, and anybody else that we can work with. I went to facilities training, which is, I don't know if you gentlemen know anything about it or not, but ISO, there's an insurance standard, and you have to have a certain amount of training for your fire paramedic in order to retain a certain insurance rate. I went to facilities training Monday and Tuesday, and rather than command what was going on, I put on a pack and said, put me where you need me and tell me what to do. So that's the kind of leader that I am.
What is the key to developing a good team?
Leadership style, obviously. I think there's a big difference between being a leader and a manager. I think leading by example is important, knowing that you're approachable. I have found in my career that I'm able to accomplish more things when my staff knows that they can depend on me. So I don't make promises that I can't keep, or I don't make a bunch of promises and only keep a couple. I make promises and say things that I know that I can do or that I can accomplish. Yes, does not happen 100% of the time, no, but it happens a lot of the time. And I successfully ran a DUI traffic and motor unit with the sheriff's office for 3 years, generating grant money, Florida LEL money, and was putting out incredible numbers as far as traffic enforcement while reducing crashes and fatalities in the county, because I was out there working with them when I could and handling all the admin stuff. And they knew that they could depend on me, and if they needed a piece of equipment, it got taken care of. And it wasn't, oh, well, I need, this fixed and it's never gonna get done, so I don't bother. I think when you start, that gets to a point where we start getting employees like that, they start to lose, distrust you, and then they lose confidence in you and they don't wanna go the extra mile for you. But I have the ability to lead and manage people to where they wanna follow me, they wanna do they wanna do a good job for me, and they wanna work hard.
How would you support the mental health of your department? What types of ideas do you have to ensure that not only the financial and physical well-being of staff are being met, but also the mental health?
So I'm glad you asked me that question. That is one of the things that is near and dear to my heart. I actually started a community liaison with the agency that not only went out and addressed issues with mental health, and when I say mental health, I'm lumping in dementia, Alzheimer's patients, because that is a mental health issue. We have a large portion of our population that suffer from that. And we implemented this program where we went out and we followed up on patients. And in conjunction with that, we also implemented a program in addition to the EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program, where we meet monthly as a multi-agency, monthly with the sheriff's office, and folks can go to that if they wish. We pay very close attention to employees when there was some type of traumatic event. Like we had a gentleman that just retired, not because of the event, but he just retired because he was at the end of his career, who had been a SWAT officer with the sheriff's office for years. Yes, that is something that we do. We don't do it in-house. I have 3 guys that are farmed out to Sebastian, 2 to Sebastian and 1 to Bureau that are SWAT medics. And unfortunately, they served a search warrant. There was a bad guy in there, shot back at him, and an innocent girl that was in the way. They were shooting through a small window, returned fire, and he went up shooting and killing her. And it was almost like after it happened, he was just put out on an island and basically left there. And we as an administration, I can't say me just personally, but we as administration called him, checked on him, obviously saying to mandatory to go talk with somebody, but then followed up with it and basically was there for him every step of the way. In fact, I just talked to him the other day. He was exonerated on any criminal charges, and then the other day I just found out that they actually dropped any of the civil suits that were against him too. So this gentleman doesn't even work for us anymore, but him and I still talk semi-regularly, and I check in on him and what have you. I can't say or emphasize more than enough how important mental health is in this job. I don't know if any of you gentlemen have been able to take the Blue Courage course that is put out, but it was a 16-hour course that was offered in the Southern Police Institute that I actually got to attend twice. And there's a large emphasis on mental health, breathing techniques, things to incorporate, being able to recognize the signs. And I fortunately have a background. I am a current licensed RN, and a portion of my background in the beginning of my nursing career was an intake nurse for psych patients. So maybe I have a better ability to recognize it more so than other people, but I think it's important. It's something that should be a part of every municipality in regards to the employees. And it doesn't just have to be the folks that go out on the road. I mean, the dispatchers, the things that they hear and go through is sometimes almost just as bad or even worse. And personally, I think it can affect anybody at any level. And I'm sure we've all seen it where, when it's left unattended, bad things happen. And unfortunately, I had a young gentleman that I supervised years ago at the sheriff's office that wasn't working anymore, that took a wrong turn and it didn't end well. And I would hate to see any of that happen anywhere that I worked. And that would be a top priority for me, especially taking over as a chief executive officer.
You will be the chief on a barrier island community. There's a hurricane expected to hit the community. What do you do? What do you do when people refuse to evacuate? How do you prepare and take care of your staff?
I've done it. I mean, that's what I'm doing now. I'm on a barrier island. We've had people refuse to leave. When that happens, we check on them. We do everything in our power to tell them, hey, you gotta go. I've even contacted, you can imagine we deal with a lot of elderly couples, so we have contacts with their relatives and what have you. We make phone calls like, hey, your parents are refusing to leave. There's a potentially Cat 4 hurricane coming. We have a part of our strategic plan, and we also have a hurricane preparedness plan, and where once the winds, we get notification of a tropical storm or depression, we enact X, Y, and Z. Then once the winds get to a certain point, we do X, Y, and Z. Fortunately, our station is it's a pretty big facility. It's pretty hardened. We'll stay there straight until a Category 3 hurricane. We have a generator. We fill the gas tanks. We go and gas for food supplies, what have you. And we basically bring everybody in that we possibly can to assist with patrol when it's obviously applicable. And then depending on the who and what of the event, like I said, if it gets to a certain point, we actually have to evacuate the island, we will, while double checking whether or not there's anybody left behind or people that refuse to be left behind. That's coordinated with the EOC locally. And then post-hurricane or post-storms, my guys are out there with chainsaws and driving with the engine up and down the streets, what have you, or making roadways open, checking on people, and doing anything and whatever we can. And I gotta say, I am one thing I'm very fortunate with the place that I work at. The ladies and gentlemen that work there, when it's time to step up and do what needs to be done, they just it's amazing some of the things that they've accomplished, shorthanded and what have you. So.
Describe your ideal process for establishing the budget for your department and ongoing monitoring and reporting.
Well, so from what I read about the town of Ocean Ridge, you guys should be well into, if not getting ready to vote or approve your final budget. It's June.
No, September.
Oh, it's at
Just
first,
started.
okay. So ours is June basically, and then it's approved at the next meeting, maybe July, August at the latest. I believe that budgeting is always an ongoing process. As very similar to Ocean Ridge, we don't have any business in town. All our taxes come from ad valorem. And then we have a building department, we generate money that way, but the bulk of what we get is from ad valorem taxes. It's an ever-going process. We work closely with the town manager. We address emergent things that need to be addressed, and I don't know if the town's done this recently or not, but we just had to convert over to the new 700 megahertz radio systems, the P25. Those things are like $6,000 a piece. The handhelds alone, we built that into the strategic plan and try to march it out and replace them little by little. But one of the first things that I would do, obviously coming over here, would be to look at the budget, see where we were at with it, in addition to doing an inventory to see what's here, what's not, what's needed. Obviously, Ms. Ladder, I'll be working closely with you on it. In the past, when we need things, unfortunately, things happen. We have a boat trailer. The boat's out all the time. It's a needed piece of equipment. It needs to be replaced. It's a $6,000 expenditure we weren't planning on. So we work with the assistant town manager to see if we have the funds available to do that. Fortunately, we do. But we try to supplement a lot of what we do too with grants. I think the town does a JAG grant here. We do a JAG grant as well as some safety grants and what have you. I think that's a never-ending process, and you need to look at it like, do people have what they need, and do we have the money to do it? And there's ways of tightening your belt, I guess, if you will, when you need to. Like I said, I think that it's a never-ending process, and it needs to be constantly looked at, especially when it gets close to the approval process and approving it for the fiscal year. But when you have things like, I notice the town has a comprehensive plan. It's great because it gives you an idea of growth and capital projects, what have you. You build that into your strategic plan, and you're able to look at like, all right, well, we can project where the town's going to be and maybe what our budget's going to look like for the following year. The only difficulty that we really see with it, and I think Ocean Ridge is the same way from what I could tell, is you have a union. So there's certain things like pay raises and contractual stuff that you have to do, you have to negotiate. We do as well, and we just gave the guys and gals a 6% raise over the next 3 years. So.
Ocean Ridge is a small department with a small overall organization. As the police chief, you will wear many hats and interact with the employees. Familiarity with operations, administration, investigations, training, policy, communications, evidence, etc. is necessary. At times, the chief will need to assist in all areas as a working chief.
Well, I love him.
As a working chief.
Yes, ma'am.
What area do you see as your greatest strength? What area have you had the least experience with in your law enforcement career?
Operations, I mean, I would want to be modest when I speak. I've had my hands in just about everything. I'm currently in charge of investigations right now. I've never worked, maybe I would say crime scene and canine. I've never been a canine handler, and I never worked directly in crime scene. Although I did have the opportunity to work for an agency where we processed our own crime scenes and did our investigation. Other than that, I've had my hands in just about everything. I'm not an auditor for accreditation by any stretch of the imagination. That's my next step. However, I'm involved in it in every step of the way. We have a mock coming up in June. I've written policy. So much as recently, and then to give you an example of how hands-on I am. We had a traffic homicide in May of 2022. I was gone. In November of last year, I was approached by the chief to investigate the traffic homicide because the part-time investigator that we had was leaving. So I went to the state attorney, who I knew, and had a close working relationship. He's actually the head state attorney at District 19, and asked him what he needed me to do, and he basically told me in nondescript words, I need you to reinvestigate the whole thing. So that's exactly what I did. In January 18th, I think it was, I got submitted an affidavit. He got a KPS from the judge, and the woman that was driving the vehicle was subsequently arrested that day. I don't know if any gentlemen have experience with traffic homicide, but it is not something that you do in the blink of an eye. I probably have 200 pages worth of documentation, including EDR data. I had to incorporate the help of FHP to do some total station mapping, what have you. It's a lot of work. Does that fall under the auspice of the lieutenant? I would say normally it doesn't, but when you have to take the opportunity to step up to help the agency, then that's exactly what he did. And that's exactly what I did. And that's what I would do here. If that involves me coming in on shift to help cover if need be, I'll do it. In fact, I was getting ready to go on shift on Saturday morning to cover for a supervisor because we just happen to be at a point where we don't have enough supervisors to cover the shifts every so often, depending on training or sick call out or what have you. So.
Share an experience in which you successfully coordinated with others.
Oh, that's the end of the question.
There's a second part.
Okay.
So.
I mean, I do that all the time. And again, I'm not trying to sound conceited. I'm a networker. I collaborate with people on a daily basis, from fleet to building a patrol car to getting repairs done on a patrol car to, we have a fire incident. You don't fight fires by yourself. You don't fight fires by a couple of engines and 6 people or 4 people going to it. Fires are fought by multiple engines, and depending on the severity of the fire or the incident, multiple people showing up, which requires collaboration and working together with the county fire, the sheriff's office, our department, and anybody else that you can think of, FP&L, utilities people, our own public works people. I couldn't possibly think of one specific incident off the top of my head that I've done that, because sometimes it seems to me it's almost like, a weekly thing. And I have no issues doing that. I think that's the way you succeed, especially with a small town, is when you collaborate. And I mean collaboration to the point where we collaborate with Mental Health Association, the hospital, Halo, which is a nonprofit organization that saves dogs, that doesn't euthanize dogs and cats. We foster animals, we take video, put them online. I mean, and it's all part of it. We raise money for the Special Olympics. We don't do that alone. We grab every police department and fire department in the county, and we do truck pulls and what have you. That's a collaborative effort where we have to work together with everybody. It's just part of, I think that's part of what small towns do, and that's all I know how to do, if you want.
The second part. How about a coordination effort that was not as successful?
Well, so that can go, it's a double-edged sword, because, we had a fire incident that wasn't in our locale, where we have a ladder truck called Equipment. And it's an auto aid, mutual aid vehicle, gigantic truck of a vehicle that we responded to a 4-story condo fire that was a full-on working fire. And it was one of, if not the first, that I ever attended as a battalion lieutenant or a chief or whatever you want to describe it as. And it's a learning process, but it was, we put the quit in the wrong place. We sat for too long out in the middle of the roadway when we should have went in with the quint. And, you know, fortunately, everything got taken care of. The floor that was actually, where most of the fire was involved, nobody was there, they were vacated. So that was probably a poorly coordinated event on my part, but, you know, it's a learning process at the same time. Fortunately, nobody got hurt, but it's just, you know, things like that happen.
How do you handle disagreements within the department and team members?
I think people are entitled to their opinion and they're entitled to disagree with you. My former chief, who recently just retired, could probably attest to that. Him and I agree, not regularly, but on several occasions on things. I remain professional about it. I don't inflame the situation. Depending on who you're disagreeing with, it may require further discussion as to why you feel this way, why they feel that way, or maybe just more of a, you just agree to disagree. But I don't have problems with people that disagree with me when it's not a situation that's going to cause a problem with the situation that you're dealing with. And I think that's just human nature, that people disagree with things all the time. I would even say that I would invite people to say, well, I disagree with your opinion or the way that you're handling it, because maybe you are wrong. Maybe their idea is better than yours, or they have a better way of handling something, or they made a better point than you have. So.
And how do you handle it when there are team members within the department that are having disagreements?
Very simply, I'm a firm believer that when you have equal rank employees that disagree on something, that they should be given the opportunity to handle it amongst themselves. And then if they can't, then their immediate supervisor should get involved. If it's something that is pretty inflamed and I need to take action, then I will. Or even to the point where you separate them until cooler heads prevail. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to that, but I'd like to see that if employees have disagreements, depending on what the disagreement is, that they handle it amongst themselves first before it ever come, you know, running into my office and say, oh, well, we have a disagreement. Okay.
How important is work-life balance?
It's very important. I would say that probably one of my biggest weaknesses is that I'm a perfectionist, and work life is, it's always work. And thankful to God, I was smart enough to, and I don't know if any of you guys, girls have children or not, but I have a beautiful, amazing 2-year-old daughter, and she is my world and my life, and the time I spend with her is more important to me than anything. And I've learned to make it a priority to spend the time with my family that I need to, and when I need to separate work and let things go, and not overthink things or handle work things outside of work that really don't need to be handled outside of work that can be taken care of the next morning. It's been a process. You know, I strive for excellence, but I've learned to separate the two and give the time that I need to my family.
All right, do you have any questions for us?
No, ma'am. Sure don't. I appreciate the opportunity. let me come down here. A little bit of a ride, but I appreciate it.
Gentlemen, do you have any follow-up questions? No. All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
We will take a small break till our next interview at 2:45.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our interviews for the police chief. Our next interview is with Thomas Levens. We have with us again Chief Gus Medina from Tequesta, Lieutenant Ryan Mugridge from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, Major Michael O. from Highland Beach, and Administrator Kevin Lucas from Jabiru Inlet Colony. I will be asking all of the questions today so that our advisory panel has an opportunity to hear your responses and write down their comments. We're going to start with you having the opportunity to just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Tom Levens. I been in law enforcement since 1985. Started in corrections in 85, started in law enforcement in 95, simultaneously through the duration, pretty much my career. I worked all over the state of Florida, I say multiple counties. Had the opportunity of working at multiple sites within each county, rising up from entry-level positions in corrections all the way up to I made warden at several different prisons across the state, including the two in Palm Beach County. I started off in law enforcement right up the road at Lantana PD as reserve. Worked into a part-time paid position. I stayed in there for 2 or 3 years until I ended up getting my first warden job up in Glades County. And that's when I relocated to Okeechobee. I transferred up to the Glades County Sheriff's Office, began reserve there, special deputy reserve through the time I ended up retiring as a full-time deputy, because after I retired from the prison, I really wanted to work the road and work in a full-time capacity. I retired from the prison system. I started my own business in Okeechobee in 2014. I bought a bowling alley, family fun center. Invested my life savings into that, my retirement, everything. I really thought it was a great idea, and that went very well up till COVID. And a bowling alley family fun center is not an essential business according to the government, and we were shut down for longer than I could withstand. And then I came back to work. I tried to teach a little bit in the interim of that period of running the bowling alley, taught virtually for the high school, and taught out of my office at the bowling alley. Worked great up to the point, again, till COVID. Decided to shut it down. I also own a septic pumping business, a small operation, one-man show, pretty much, 2 little trucks, but one-man show. I decided to come back to law enforcement full time. Came back to the city of Clewiston. I entered into the city of Clewiston. 90 days after that, I was promoted to sergeant. Within 12 months, I was promoted to interim commander of support services. Our commander for support services got into a very bad accident on duty, April of last year, and I was put in the active capacity, but once we realized he was not going to come back for a very, very long time, she put me in the interim capacity. And then in May of this year, I was promoted to commander of operations permanently. And that's where I sit.
What role do you feel culture of the organization plays? How would you assess the culture of our department? And how would you recognize and what would you do if the culture becomes toxic?
Well, to assess culture, you have to really get involved in the department, the personnel in the community, really be visible, really be personable, really be genuine with all the stakeholders. And that's multi-layers, not just inside the city, but the stakeholders for the city or for the town. But, you know, really just investing a lot of time with the personnel in the department, really get to know them on a very close level. I mean, it's a small agency, worked at many small agencies. So you really get to know the personnel. They get to really know you. They can assess your genuineness, your authenticity. And if you are authentic and genuine with the personnel and they can see that, then you really get a better understanding of what's going on internally, the dynamics internally. And the same with the community. If they know you're sincere, you care, they really will share and open up, and you really can engage and assess what's happening, you know, the culture. And, you know, and then you make your judgments and assess from your assessments from there. If it becomes toxic, then you have to find out what it was that caused the toxicity. It could be a person, it could be an event, it could be whatever it is. And that you just have to address directly. I mean, there's no soft coding that. You know, you really have to get rid of a toxic environment because it just multiplies the toxicity. And so whatever that would mean, based on what it was, whether it's person, place, event, it really has to be addressed. It has to be direct, and it has to be written.
Which is more important, retaining employees or hiring to fill vacancies? What changes or ideas do you have for retaining employees or for filling vacancies?
Well, I've worked in many small agencies, many small duty stations that experiences a lot of turnover, and people leave for various reasons. Sometimes they chase the dollar, sometimes they leave for other reasons. And it's very difficult. You end up doing more with less. You end up, everybody does something. You invest in people, you build them up. You invest a lot of time and money into building their skill sets and their work skill sets. So the value of that employee becomes greater typically, and you certainly don't want to lose good employees. You don't want to lose employees that you spend a lot of time, money, and investing in their self-betterment for their career and their service to the town. But in that case, you can't always stop it either. People leave for various reasons. I left, every time I left a duty station was for a promotion. The culture was great, but the opportunity was elsewhere. You can't stop events like that. People want to self-better their lives. If there's a lot of opportunity for growth and turnover here, people tend to stay longer. If they're not, a lot of opportunity for growth and, you know, enrichment in their careers here, then they would like to leave. You try to mitigate that the best you can. You do anything and everything you can within reason to combat against that. But I don't know of anybody that's ever found the silver bullet for that either. As far as recruitment goes, everybody's competing for the same employees in the same right. I mean, in a population of this size, this county, I taught at the academy right here in Palm Beach County, Lake Worth, for many years, and just watched the competition for employees. And this was even, you know, when I was teaching at the academy, it was back in the mid-90s. And the competition for employees was great because of the agencies around here. So you have to be creative. You have to, but more so go back to the environment itself, the culture of the agency. If people really like it here, they would tend to stay here or want to stay here. And you know, chasing the dollar is great, but if you leave one agency that is very efficient, but very promoting in the sense of just camaraderie as well as and enriching into the employees' lives, and they'll think twice whether chasing that extra 50 cents may be worth it or not. If it's not, they would want to leave. But if you do anything and everything within your capabilities to make them employees feel welcomed and feel valued here within the agency, they will second guess, sometimes leave.
Describe your leadership style.
I'm a very proactive leader. I roll up my sleeves every day and get busy with anything and everything, the task at hand, and I've done that in the prison as well as on the road. I'm very fair, very genuine with people, and they see that and they get that very quickly. That enables you to establish good rapport and relations with the employees. And if they, again, like it here, want to work here, they tend to stay here. I'm very conscious of innovation and efficiency. So I'm working in small agencies. You have to find the best approaches, the best practices, the most innovation that you can acquire within your means. Glades County Sheriff's Office is a good example, which covered 800 square miles, and there was two deputies and a sergeant on duty at any given time. And that's a challenge. Our complement was 3 deputies and a sergeant, but that was very rare, if ever, happened. Oftentimes you find yourself just 2 people on the road. And when it's like that, you really have to think of your practice and procedures and maximize efficiencies. And that takes leadership to do it. I mean, you have to buy in to what your personnel are telling you that makes things better. And they feel it just as much as you. They see it, they recognize it. And so a good leader will, be open, listen, evaluate, try, sample, pilot different things to get those efficiencies. So, leadership for me is a broad spectrum of things. It's not just being firm, fair, and consistent. It's just not being open-minded or having an open door policy. I mean, it goes well beyond that. It encompasses a lot of different things, especially for smaller agencies that have to do more with less and accomplish the same thing that other agencies do.
What is the key to developing a good team?
Genuineness is one of the biggest keys for me. I found that, again, being genuine, being sincere and earnest with your team, letting them know that they can trust you, that you're going to support them, that you're going to do the same job that they do if necessary, just equalizes the task at hand, if you will. And it very promotes the team environment. It augments the team environment very well when they see everybody doing the same thing. As far as there's no task that me as the commander, I wouldn't do at the agency. Being the support commander, we oversee animal control for the city, for the eastern part of the county, for about 400 square miles. And we end up, it's a very small agency. We only have 2 animal control officers, and when one of them leaves and the other one's out, somebody still has to go in there and do the job. And when they see that I will just throw on my work clothes and get out there and scrubbing kennels down as a commander, they realize that that's the essence of team. It's just getting the job done no matter what it takes, no matter who's going to do it. It's just throwing caution to the wind and getting it done. So I value team. I'm very cognitive of team approach. The value of the individuals within the team really matters. You get a lot of utility out of empowering your team. They can tell if they just are a figure within the team or if they really have power within the team and can operate and facilitate the mission or task. They know it, they recognize it, they feel it. And, so promoting that team effect, the value and the empowerment accomplishes a lot more than just the verbal and the vernacular of the team.
How would you support the mental health of your department? What types of ideas do you have to ensure that not only the financial and physical well-being of the staff are being met, but also the mental health?
Mental health or mental wellness, as I put it, is a very critical component of what we do nowadays. It's always been there, but especially now. In typical environments of smaller agencies, you do a lot more. Each individual of the agency does a lot more. You see a lot. I mean, we see things that when I say the normal person may not see. And so the mental wellness of the individuals is critical to maintaining resiliency within the agency, as a person, as a team, as an agency. So we have to utilize any resources that we have available to us. We have to seek resources. There's a plethora of resources out there that is available to law enforcement, whether it's the hotlines, there's peer-to-peer groups out there that will just let the workforce call them, talk to them, meet them if they necessary, and decompress all the things that we do see and do. And some people deal with internal stress, as I call it, of the job, of the environment that we work in, better than others. Some people hide it better than others. But the promoting it, being open, candid about it, removing the stigma of the resources and getting the help to maintain your mental wellness is critical. Removing the stigmas, and all the negative connotations to it helps staff members feel comfortable utilizing the resources.
You will be the chief on a barrier island community. There's a hurricane expected to hit the community. What do you do? What do you do when people refuse to evacuate? How do you prepare and take care of your staff?
But early preparation is the key. Early education and preparation has always been the key. Facing natural disasters such as hurricanes. The more we can do in advance, the better we're going to be prepared to overcome or recover, is a better way of saying it, from a hurricane. There's very little to prevent a storm from hitting you. You can't deflect it. You can't, do things to eliminate the threat, and very little that you can do to reduce the threat. But being resilient to the threat and being in a capacity there where you can recover fast and return to normalcy, whatever normalcy is, that's at the quickest. It helps you, helps the individual, it helps the agency, and it helps the town recover from such event. And there's, again, a plethora of information from emergency management, from the National Hurricane Center, from FEMA, to help educate us. And we seem to learn a little bit each storm. The last storm that came across the West Coast, Ian, taught us some different things over there as well for evacuations and the recovery efforts. I was in Miami when Hurricane Andrew came, and that was quite an eye-opener from our experience. Landmarks being removed, and people that lived in that community their whole lives that are accustomed to operating in the sense of by landmarks and by what they see, really had to educate the people living there on what to do next and how to be better resilient when storms like that come, because it was devastating. I mean, it was devastating. I don't know, I don't have a better word for that. And it took a long time to overcome because the resiliency was not there. The education, the training, the preparation, the advanced preparation just wasn't there in 92, when Andrew hit. And we're much better positioned today because of the education, the training, and the resiliency that we're trying to establish on the front end of preparing for a storm. Early announcements, early evacuation, recommendations, and then mandates, and really seems to help. And most people that have seen these very impactful storms understand what the potentials are of such storm. And most people use and apply the common sense of evacuating when instructed. Very few, I would imagine, I'm not that as accustomed to familiar with the town practice of evacuating, but very few, I would imagine, would not evacuate if mandated. But, you know, the education process is all the same, and preparing them and letting the residents understand that, you know, emergency operations doesn't, vehicles, you know, ambulance, fire, police doesn't travel in the storms. And then they're aggravating the recovery efforts if they do not leave. And then, you know, it just, if as in with Ian's case and, you know, the flooding and the amount of water damage in the communities that made it more difficult to do the search and rescues. And when people see that, then they reevaluate their own personal evaluation plans and evacuation plans. And I think those are, you know, we get a lot of utility out of past events, you know, learning lessons learned from those past events and apply them on the front end again of the early education and training and preparation advisories and announcements that when changes their mind about staying. And obviously that's the key. If we can get them to evacuate when we ask them, when the mandates come out, it makes it easier for the recovery process of the post-storm.
Describe your ideal process for establishing the budget for your department and ongoing monitoring and reporting.
Well, the first thing I always like to do is look at historics. You know, look at the historical data that's there, the 5-year trends, see what the spending has been like over that period, see where the peaks and see where any anomalies that has happened and possibly identify the anomaly and why. See where if the trends of certain line items or components of the budget that was always overspent, then again, analyzing the whys on that. And making a realistic budget that meets the needs of the department, of the agency, based on the historic data, based on the forecast data that's available to us. And then, you know, just making sure that it's sound, it's reasonable, running it through finance director to, you know, have a set of eyes. My last agency, we developed an internal budget team that just helped project and forecast things that we needed, training events and different things to better enrich our staff, but as well prepare our agency, you know, to be more efficient. The biggest key is the historics. I mean, they guide you on the reoccurring cost of your department and the reoccurring cost of salaries and benefit package, fuels, utilities. Those reoccurring costs are the most reliable in the sense of, you know that where they're at, the inflation rates and stuff, where it's going to probably be at minus any, you know, national catastrophe or anything. So they heavily rely on the historic data. And then the input, especially coming into I'm sure you're at the beginning of the budget process for the next fiscal year, you know, relying on the subject matter experts within the town and the workforce already there that knows and that can help forecast what lies ahead as well as what we just had in front of us for the historics.
Ocean Ridge is a small department within a small overall organization. As the police chief, you will wear many hats and interact with the employees. Familiarity with operations, administration, investigations, training, policy, communications, evidence, etc. is necessary. At times, the chief will need to assist in all areas as a working chief. What area do you see as your greatest strength? And what area do you have the least experience in your law enforcement career?
My greatest strength is in operations. I've been mostly in operations my whole life, in prison as well as in law enforcement. So I understand it. I can feel the rhythm. I can feel the pulse a lot easier and quicker. The technology side of investigations is probably the weaker part. Overseeing the detective bureau, if I read the website accurately, that we have one here. We have one where I'm at. So I oversee it, but don't utilize all the resources that detective has available to do backgrounds and to do investigative inquiries through the databases that we have available. I'm familiar with them. If you said the name or the acronym, I would know what it is, but I really haven't used it to see the capabilities, to see if we're utilizing all the resources that at our disposal efficiently or accurately. If we cannot, or if we can or cannot improve the way we're doing that. In my quest for this next year, one of my personal goals within my agency is to get more familiar with that, so that I can backfill if he's not there. I do that now, except I don't utilize the databases that's available to us. So that's my personal goal my improvement goal for myself for this next 12 months is to get more familiar with those, within the ICAD and the different databases that assist us in performing 21st century investigations.
Share an experience in which you successfully coordinated with others, and then an effort in which that coordination was not as successful.
We recently had a tornado come through the town, and it struck a nursing home. We had to completely evacuate the nursing home into a temporary shelter, and then from the temporary shelter to the permanent location that they were going to go to. That was a multi-agency event, police, fire, EMS, Salvation Army, the different places, different agencies, different resources showed up, EMS, emergency management from the county, everybody was involved. That was a very coordinated effort. It began very well. I mean, all hands on deck is very easy to see and manage when it first happens. But then we, as always, we established the incident command, and there was a lot of ad hoc tasks or activities or even agencies coming in to help, local community agencies. That wasn't being driven through incident command. And it just started making the coordination, starting to get a little bit going astray. And we didn't, from the incident command, always know what was happening. And that's not what you want to be doing. It happens. It almost happens in every event around. You got to be very disciplined in maintaining incident command. It's very easy to have the ad hoc task or self-deployed, personnel and the different things that happen to manage that. So, we did very well in it. And collaborating with the different agencies and unified command, but there's things that didn't go as well as we hoped that it went. And, as part of our debrief and after action, we identified a lot of those well-meaning, well-purposed, people coming running in to help. The school system came in and started providing some food and the different things that happened, but without being all coordinated and orchestrated through the incident command, we didn't really know what was happening, and everybody wasn't hearing the same data or the same intel that we should have been. Even with the evacuation to the permanent site, the buses were showing up, and the nursing home individuals didn't even know that they were evacuating. So weren't able to tell us. And then now we started dismissing our resources, especially the fire department. And now we have to start recalling them because now we got to evacuate 120 people again from this temporary shelter on to their final destination. And then, so it made it very, a lot of obstacles we're trying to overcome on the fly, and it was challenging. So that was both examples of one in a very recent event.
How do you handle disagreements within the department and team members?
Disagreements will happen. People, humans, are by nature going to disagree, going to argue, fight, not get along well at times. The root, the basic fundamental block still has to be team. We have to reemphasize that we are one team, we have one mission, and we have one job. And starting from that helps a lot. It doesn't quell or stop everything. We know that. We have to just sit down with the individuals and figure out what their issue is and why their issue. And a lot of times it's coworkers, but sometimes it's with their immediate supervisor as well. So now that adds a different dynamic to it. So now it's into the supervisory subordinate roles, and was that managed correctly, or was that done? What was the stimuli behind that, or the antecedent that caused this? So it's just managing people. It's just, again, being fair, being empathetic to both sides of the equation, and then but being very firm and fair that we're with the individuals, and there's you eliminate the favoritisms, and you eliminate the rank titles for a minute, just to understand both sides and to figure out what was prudent and what we should do and what we should have done, and then just kind of re-educate, or we take it from there. I mean, if it went all the way into a employee misconduct action, then we have to address that as well. But most times we can stop it before it gets there. Most time we can just quell the little argument, the disagreement at a one-to-one level. And you just got to stay on top of it. Ignoring it doesn't help. Letting it reoccur doesn't help. You just have to be strong enough as a person, as a manager, to sit, listen, but then resolve. Find a resolve, whatever the resolve has to be, but find the resolve so we can move forward, and hopefully not allow that same stimuli to reoccur that created the conflict to begin with.
How important is work-life balance?
To me, very important. I've been married for 38 years to my high school sweetheart. We have 3 kids, 5 grandkids. Being in this environment, even in the prison settings, we lived on the prison grounds in the different places. And that meant you're the first person they come and get to when it's overtime. First person they come get when it's an incident's going on. And you forfeit a lot of your family time, when stuff like that happens. Working up through ranks in the different agencies, again, you're the first person they should call when something happens. First person that may need to respond, especially in smaller agencies like this. We only have 1 detective and me. Somebody's got to come out. So it's very challenging, but it's very important. My wife is very understanding, but at the same time, we recognize the opportunities we missed at the family level through my career, the different little events, special events with my kids growing up that you can't get back. So I'm a big proponent of family time. I'm a big proponent of making sure that everybody has the access to the family time that's needed. In smaller agencies, I'll come work and let, one of the staff members go home and have Thanksgiving dinner. And then, clock out, go home and then come back, or relieve them for the day, relieve them early, come in late, and do different things to help promote it because, we have in smaller agencies very limited resources. So if everybody doesn't apply that equally and not just read on the benefit on admin, I get weekend holidays and everybody else just has to work. That's a wrong message to send because it doesn't promote family, life balance as well, because it's only work for you, but not you. So it doesn't promote it. It doesn't foster the importance for everybody to have that balance. And it doesn't promote, the culture that you really care. So, it is important. Somebody's got to be here Christmas Day. Somebody has to be here Thanksgiving, New Year's, or what have you. Somebody has to be here and miss a birthday party or something. But the more you are cognizant to the importance of it, and the more you do what you can do within your means to make it viable for each individual, the better it becomes as a whole. So I live it personally, and I promote it within every agency I've ever been in.
Gentlemen, do you have any follow-up questions? Do you have any questions for us?
I do not have any questions. I appreciate the opportunity of entertaining my application for the position. I've been in law enforcement a very long time. I'm a very genuine person, a very sincere, honest person. But I have worked with so many different agencies and had the ability and the opportunity to excel in each one and rise through the ranks. That has gave me a very diverse background, education, and experience for positions such as this. I would be honored to serve as the chief here. I did look through the applicant pool that was posted online. You got a challenge before you to make your selection. There's no doubt about that. And I assume that each one of the candidates are good. So that makes your task even harder. Typical questions that's why should we promote you over anybody else? Glad you didn't ask that, by the way, because I hate that question, because it almost forces you to have this little aroma of arrogance to declare that you're the best. But at the same right, I would assume everybody that you interviewed today and still yet to interview are going to be good candidates. But I will tell you, I will not disappoint you if selected. I will give everything, give my all to the agency, to the town, as I did every other agency. I don't think I would have been able to rise through the ranks in each of the agencies that I've been in without that capability and without the administration or the executive recognizing that. So I just want to thank you for your time. I would answer any other questions specific to my application if asked. I don't think anybody has. I did update the interim position to permanent position. That was really the only change since I turned it in. I certainly appreciate your time. And again, your task is a daunting one ahead of you, and I wish you well with it.
Well, we will be, or I will be announcing the decision after the Planning and Zoning Board on June 20th, immediately following that meeting or not before 10:30 a.m. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Our next interview will begin at 4 p.m., so we will take a short break.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the police chief interviews. It is our 4 o'clock interview with Michael McClure, goes by Scott. We have with us again this afternoon, Chief Gus Medina from Tequesta, Lieutenant Ryan Mugridge from Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, Major Michael O. from Highland Beach, and Administrator Kevin Lucas from Jupiter Inlet Colony. We are going to start with Scott, if you would like to just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Scott McClure. I've been a police officer now for 33 years. I'm a lifelong resident of Florida. I grew up here, Palm Beach County. I went to school here all the way through my bachelor's degree at FAU. I was 21 when I started in the town of Palm Beach. My father was a police officer for West Palm. My mom worked for the federal government, and I had a 2-year degree, and I decided to follow my father's footsteps. I started in 1991 in the town of Palm Beach at 21. And I worked here for 25 years. I was a road officer. I was a Marine officer, assigned to the Marine unit. I was a field training officer. I was a sergeant. I managed the juvenile first offender program. I was the emergency field operations, burglary strike force. I worked undercover. I managed teams of probably 10 officers via the night shift or day shift. Had a stellar career. I had 6 life-saving awards, multiple officer, Palm Beach Police Officer of the Year. I can't complain. I had a wonderful career there, and I retired in 2016. I have a family. I got married when I was there, and my wife. I have 2 kids, 2 wonderful kids. And when I retired, they were just getting ready to enter college. So I said, I'm too young to retire. So I knew the chief here then at the time, and I was going to become a reserve officer because there were no openings here. And he said that he had an opening, so I said, well, count me in, and I was retired a month, I think. And I started work here as an officer, and I worked midnights for a year. And then there was a sergeant's position available. I took the promotional test, and I was lucky enough to get promoted to sergeant. I was a sergeant for only 6 months, and a lieutenant's position came open. And I've been a lieutenant. I got promoted. I put in for the lieutenant's position. I got promoted. I've been a lieutenant now for going on 5 years here in the town of Ocean Ridge. And here I sit now.
All right. What role do you feel the culture of an organization plays? How would you assess the culture of our department? And how would you recognize and what would you do if the culture becomes toxic?
The culture here in Ocean Ridge, we're in a transformational period right now. And the last 3 years, I've seen a lot of changes. I've had 2 previous chiefs in the almost 8 years I've been here. 3 town managers. But I think it's in a growth, in a stability. I want to provide stability to the department and to the town right now. The culture is good. I had unsolicited support from the officers, the residents, the community, unbelievable. I've gotten to know the ins and outs of this town. It's a unique town, residential town, no businesses. We have 2 county parks and the city of Boynton. And I am also the town marshal of the town of Rainy Breezes, the trailer park to the south of us. The culture, I think, is very good. I haven't not heard any negativity from the officers or anyone. If it becomes toxic, I think it's a failure somewhere, but we need to find the root of the problem, kill the rumor mill, and address the problem before things get out of hand, for sure.
Okay. Which is more important, retaining employees or hiring to fill vacancies? What changes or ideas do you have for retaining employees and for filling vacancies?
Retaining is most important over hiring. There's unforeseen things where family matters happen and that employees have to move away. But if you have a good morale and good culture and if you try to keep up with the benefits and provide for the officers, you can hopefully keep them. And we have a support group here that the town folks donate money to, and I just started for the college reimbursement, not a reimbursement, but a scholarship program. I'm sorry, scholarship program for the kids, for the employees, that's for the dispatchers and police officers, and the civilians here. They're members of our support group, but $1,200, it's not much, but it's a start. Per year they can get as an incentive to keep people, and obviously the benefit package. But I think I'd like to, involve the public more. I think community policing is key.
Okay. Describe your leadership style.
More of a democratic style. I have an open door policy. I like to listen to the needs of my officers and the public. I don't like to micromanage. I have trust in my officers, and I hope in turn they can trust me. There are situations though in operational plans and whatnot where we have to do, it becomes more direct supervision where it's not, open for discussion, but I try to be personal with all the people and work on. I'm in the same shoes, and I wouldn't ask them to do anything I wouldn't do.
What is the key to developing a good team?
Knowing the goals and objectives of what the mission is, picking the right people, not micromanaging, seeking their input, and being a good leader to whatever the goal is for that team. A team is in a small team manner or the organization.
How would you support the mental health of your department? What types of ideas do you have to ensure that not only the financial and physical well-being of the staff are being met, but also the mental health?
I know financially, I know that the officers have just gotten a nice pay raise, and the mental health wise, I know that officers are not immune to post-traumatic stress. They're not immune to depression. There are things that can be provided to them through employee assistance program. I know the sheriff's office has a mental health unit. I would reach out to find out whatever I could. I would have the sergeants look for early warning signs, and hope that they could come to me, and I would try to provide as much assistance as I could. We have a gym that just got relocated to our garage.
You will be the chief on a barrier island community. There's a hurricane expected to hit the community. What do you do? What do you do when people refuse to evacuate? How do you prepare and take care of your staff?
All important. First is planning. Have a plan in place. Keeping an eye on the storm. Working with the Emergency Operations Center. And once a warning or watch is in place, it's time to act. We act fast. We have to video the whole town, make sure that everything's buttoned up through the construction sites and whatnot. Video post entry, but the employees are the main and the safety of the residents. But we have a plan with logistics with food, the lodging here, because they're expected to stay 3 to 4 days to the length of the storm. But I want to make sure my employees have the time to take care of their needs, their private residence before they come. And post, we're a team, we will help out our employees if there's something after the storm. But we're here to weather the storm, make sure that we do have an evacuation plan if we have to evacuate if there's a Category 5 storm. In the 33 years I've been a police officer, I can't count how many hurricanes I've been through. I've been through 3, I think, here alone in Ocean Ridge. But key is keep the officer fed. Very important. But we have, curfews come out, depending on, the damage, whether we can let residents back in. We cannot force a resident to leave. Back in the day, we used to hand them a next to kin notice, but we don't do that anymore. We encourage them to leave, but we cannot force them. Just the other, Monday night, for the commission meeting, I asked for a high water truck, which was a truck that we already had to lift it, because we are prone to heavy flooding and king tides here in Ocean Ridge, and a rescue boat. I asked for a 18-foot John boat with a 40 horsepower engine in it, and it did pass. So we have those two things to our arsenal now for hurricane preparedness. FEMA, I went through all the FEMAs, 100, 200, 700, 300, 400. That's very important too, the FEMA part of the reporting part for the hurricane for reimbursement.
Describe your ideal process for establishing the budget for your department and ongoing monitoring and reporting.
Repeat that one. Ongoing budget. Okay. We're in budget process right now. It's very important to look at your reoccurring costs from look at last year's budget, look at the reoccurring costs, know what the inflation is going to be. Look at your needs, what you need for capital improvements, and come up with a plan to present that to the county council so we get approval. But work closely with the town manager. We have a meeting tomorrow for budget, and then not the recurring, but to monitor it. It's key. It's like balancing a checkbook. Can't spend what you don't have. It's soon you have to daily, as soon as monitor the status of the accounts.
Ocean Ridge is a small department within a small overall organization. As the police chief, you will wear many hats and interact with the employees. Familiarity with operations, administration, investigations, training, policy, communications, evidence, etc. is necessary. At times, the chief will need to assist in all areas as a working chief. What area do you see as your greatest strength, and what area have you had the least experience in your law enforcement career?
I've learned coming here, this is many hats, where you don't have the civilian support where I came from. I've learned a lot since I've been here with, I've had the two previous chiefs and what we've had to do here at working at a small agency. My weakness would probably be IT matters. I've learned a lot. When I go back to the server room, I did not want to see all the wires and plugs. So thank God we have we outsource our IT for problems like that. But I have become very proficient with all the programs we're running. Technology has exploded with police work. I purchased new mobile printing units since I've been intern. We're constantly changing, updating the programs. Since I've been a lieutenant, I've done all the scheduling, training, backgrounds, policy. We just started accreditation. I've drafted all the policies here. I'm trying to, the LPR service we had, I wrote the first LPR policy because we did not have it. Now it's outdated, and I'm trying to go with a new vendor. I just got approval Monday for that new vendor so we can be town-wide with the same vendor, and we have the sharing capabilities with other agencies. But technology, I'm learning fast. I'm a people person. I like keeping morale good. I've been in charge of fleet maintenance here. The ammunition storage and buying, all the backgrounds, like I said, I've worn a lot of hats since I've been in the lieutenant's position. Managing people is my forte, I would say. I enjoy that.
Share an experience in which you successfully coordinated with others, and then an experience in which the coordination was not as successful.
Coordination with others is daily. We as a small agency, we provide training to agencies around us, to the north and to the south of us. Palm Beach, I work closely with them where I retired from, but Manalapan, Gulfstream, Highland Beach, we provide our shooting range for them to use. What was the question?
And then a coordination effort where it wasn't
Okay,
as
I have
successful.
very mutual aid too. I just, we have mutual aid with, the sheriff's office, with the inlet, with the, Hammond Park. I just got, the contract for the condo south of Briny Breezes, which we took over from the sheriff's office just Monday night. Throughout my career, I've worked with, multiple agencies, federal level, state level. I've done dignitary protection for world leaders, for presidents. I've brought, through mutual aid, I've brought details to the officers here. My old agency could not fulfill the details, so now my officers are working details in Palm Beach if they're available. We work details and, for FAU, they requested our assistance, for football games. You know, and if I haven't, the follow-up would be if, where it's failed, you said?
Where it hasn't been as successful.
Well, I think in any major event, if you look at after action plans, there's always something that you find that you can improve on. Trying to think of, I can't really think of, it hasn't been successful. You know, in an after action plan, you can find that you were lacking in certain areas for traffic, for breaches of security, for anything. I think you always can reach back and look, you know, and find out how you can improve things, but, I mean, I can't think of an example where I really failed in a mutual aid situation.
How do you handle disagreements within the department and between the team members?
I think the key is to nip it in the bud, before it gets out of hand. I would hope that the sergeants, or if there's no lieutenants now, but a lieutenant could nip that in the bud and meet with the to come to an agreement before it does go to the next level. Certain things do go to the next level, but I would hope it would do that before it does become a problem for the town. I would try to solve the matter before it got out of hand.
How important is work-life balance?
Very important. Police officers have shift work. If you have a family, you miss certain family things, but it's just what you have to do. We try not to take our work home with us, but yeah, you do. You hope that you know the officer has a family or a support system that he can rely on. Hobbies. I try to get to a personal level with the officers to find out, you know, what their personal life is like. And I try to give advice and help them if they need it. But I know in my own life, I've had a good support system with my wife and my family. And it's very important to balance. But you do have to, police work, there's a lot of dedication, I can tell you that.
Gentlemen, do you have any follow-up questions?
All good.
No? Scott, do you have any questions for us?
I mean, I just want to tell everybody I appreciate you guys spending the whole day here. Spending your time, and I appreciate everybody and appreciate the public.
Well, we will adjourn this meeting and return at 6:30 for the advisory panel to give me their input and for us to hear public comment. Thank you very much, Scott.